And then you just leave it. That was all me.
Okay. Good morning. The committee will please come to order. A quorum being present, I'm pleased to call this morning's meeting of the Committee on Small Business to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any point. In today's markup, we will be considering 4 bipartisan bills. 2 of the bills will require SBA's resource partners to provide counseling and training to individuals in prison and post-release. The other 2 bills will make meaningful improvements to contracting programs that support small businesses. I would like to take a moment to thank the ranking member and all the members of the committee for their bipartisanship and commitment to small business. It is not small feat that together we have worked to pass 23 bipartisan bills that will make it easier for Americans to launch and grow their small business. And all those bills have sailed through the House of Representatives with broad bipartisan support. That is a good track record, and I want to thank all of you. That is part of the reason why I am so pleased to lead this committee. But the other part is that I have an opportunity to work on issues that can really make a difference in people's lives. Today, we have an opportunity to do just that with the 2 prison to proprietorship bills. We can also, why do you use that, such a difficult word for me to pronounce? We can also make it easier for small businesses to compete in the federal marketplace by leveling the playing field for small contractors on the verge of transitioning out of the small business definition and those hoping to build a history of past performance. With that, let's turn to the bills under consideration. As a result of hearings and outreach, the committee today is considering 4 bills, which are H.R. 5078, the Prison to Proprietorship Act, introduced by myself and co-sponsored by Ranking Member Chabot. H.R. 5065, the Prison to Proprietorship for the Formerly Incarcerated Act, introduced by Mr. Jeffries and co-sponsored by Mr. Burchett. H.R. 5130, the Capturing All Small Businesses Act of 2019, introduced by Mr. Vesey and co-sponsored by Mr. Hearn. And 5146, the Unlocking Opportunities for Small Business Act, introduced by Mr. Hagedorn and co-sponsored by Mr. Evans. I support each of the bills to be marked up today. In the interest of time, I will now like to recognize our ranking member, Mr. Chabot, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for holding this morning's markup. And again, I appreciate your and your staff's willingness to work with me and our staff in such a bipartisan manner. All 4 of these bills are led by members of both parties, which has become standard practice in our committee, whichever party is in the majority. So we thank you for that. I'll be brief in my opening as we will discuss each bill as they come up, but we have 2 sets of bills today. 2 of them focus on fostering entrepreneurship among the soon-to-be and formerly incarcerated. Last month, we held a hearing that featured compelling testimony about the power of entrepreneurship and how that power can help people looking to get their lives back on track after having been incarcerated. These individuals typically face higher rates of unemployment than any other segment of our population. Providing worthy candidates with an outlet for their entrepreneurial spirit not only helps them reacclimate to society, but also boosts our economy and local communities. The other 2 bills focus on a long-standing goal of our committee, increasing small business access to the federal marketplace. The government is the largest, our government, the United States government, is the largest purchaser of goods and services anywhere in the world. Our job is to ensure that small businesses have ample opportunity to compete for those federal contracts. A vibrant small business presence here increases competition, increases quality, and lowers prices for the American taxpayer. All of these things are good, obviously. Both bills will make it easier for small firms to compete against the big guys. Again, thank you, Madam Chair, for holding this hearing and marking up these four important bills today, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back. Before we get into the individual bills, are there any members present who seek recognition for the purposes of making an opening statement? Seeing none, we will move to consideration of H.R. 5078, the Prison to Proprietorship Act, introduced by myself and Ranking Member Chabot. I sincerely want to thank Ranking Member Chabot for joining me as the lead co-sponsor on the bill. Leading this bill with you sends a strong message to SBA, our resource partners, and the formerly incarcerated that helping guide this individual onto the path of entrepreneurship is a priority. After paying their debt to society, former inmates return to their communities with hopes and the goals of starting fresh. Unfortunately, many are locked out of the labor market. As we heard in our hearing last month, employers do not want to hire them because of the stigma associated with incarceration, and many lack the skill needed to work in the 21st century. Entrepreneurship training can help individuals overcome the barriers to re-enter in the workforce. And for the formerly incarcerated, it can be the difference between successfully reintegrating back into the community or returning to prison. With approximately 180,000 individuals locked up in federal prisons across the country, which cost nearly $100 per day per inmate, it makes fiscal sense to give these folks the tools they need to build a meaningful life. H.R. 5078 requires SBA resource partners to provide counseling and training to individuals in prison. Federal prisoners will be eligible for in-depth classroom instruction combined with one-on-one mentoring and priority given for inmates within 18 months of release. SBA resource partners with more than 1,000 centers located across the country are perfectly suited and very well positioned to carry out these services in federal prison. Unlocking opportunities for the formerly incarcerated will empower and enable them to rebuild their lives, build wealth, and promote lasting economic growth. I now recognize the ranking member to speak on H.R. 5078.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Bureau of Justice Statistics discovered that almost half of all U.S. prisoners were without access to vocational training programs. There's an opportunity here that leaves room for the emerging field of prison to proprietorship. Private sector programs saw 57% of the businesses remain open, a percentage that is higher than the average rate of business survival. Graduates of these programs also maintain a 7.5% three-year recidivism rate, exponentially smaller than the national average of 50%. Our bill, H.R. 5078, the Prison to Proprietorship Act, directs the Association of Women's Business Centers and the Association of Small Business Development Centers to coordinate reentry entrepreneurship services by providing counseling and training services that focus on individuals who have been incarcerated in a federal prison. This bill will create a pathway for qualified ex-offenders to be successful, contributing members of society. I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for your dedication and partnership on this very important piece of legislation. I'm glad that we're able to work on this and that it is bipartisan, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chabot. Are there any other members who wish to be recognized for a statement on H.R. 5078? I now, So I am seeing none. I urge my colleagues to support this important legislation that will give federal prisoners a second chance to lead meaningful and productive lives after release. If there is no further discussion, the committee will move to consideration of H.R. 5078. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 5078, the Prison to Proprietorship
Without
Act.
objection, H.R. 5078 is considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Are there any members who wish to offer an amendment? Seeing none, the question is now on H.R. 5078. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. H.R. 5078 is agreed to. The question now occurs on reporting H.R. 5078 to the House. All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 5078 is reported favorably to the House. Without objection, the committee staff is authorized to correct punctuation, make other necessary technical corrections, and conforming changes. Without objection, members shall also be entitled to 2 days to file additional supplemental dissenting and minority views. Our second bill today is H.R. 5065, the Prison to Proprietorship Act for the formerly incarcerated, introduced by Mr. Jeffries and co-sponsored by Mr. Burchett. This bill complements the Prison to Proprietorship bill by requiring the Service Court of Retired Executives to provide mentoring workshops and training videos for formerly incarcerated individuals on how to launch and grow small businesses. I would now like to recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Schneider, for an opening statement on H.R. 5065.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank you for holding the hearing earlier this fall that examined entrepreneurship as an opportunity for formerly incarcerated individuals. We heard compelling testimony that spoke to how we can empower the formerly incarcerated with the skills to start their own small businesses, and what a powerful force that can be, both for those individuals as well as their communities. I want to thank my colleagues, Hakeem Jeffries and Tim Burchett, for introducing the Prison to Proprietorship for Formerly Incarcerated Act. I am proud to be a co-sponsor of this bill. The legislation and the legislation that we just voted on, the Prison Proprietorship Act, will empower those leaving the federal prison system with not only the skills, but also the support to start their own small business. I have long been a fan of the SCORE program and how it helps burgeoning small businesses expand and grow. Mentorship can play a vital role in the success of entrepreneurs and citizens returning to society after serving time, facing unique challenges when trying to start their own small business. I know this legislation would have a positive impact in my own district. Our own Small Business Development Center, based out of the College of Lake County, is in the process, in conjunction with the local county jail, of offering entrepreneurship courses to a cohort of inmates. I am proud of the initiative our SBDC, particularly its director, Mitch Benvenu, has undertaken designing and offering this program. I look forward to hearing about the success stories of these inmates once they return to their own communities. And I'm excited to push this bill forward because I know that SCORE would provide these individuals with the mentorship that could be instrumental for their success. No one starts a successful small business on their own, and SCORE can be an invaluable pipeline for the help necessary to making the dream of running one's own small business a reality. Thank you again to my colleagues, Mr. Burchett and Mr. Jeffries, for their work on this important bill. I would also like to ask unanimous consent to include Mr. Jeffries' written testimony in support of H.R. 5065 into the record.
Without objection, the statement is entered into the record.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. I now like to recognize the other sponsor of the bill, Mr. Burchett from Tennessee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Lady Velasquez and Ranking Member Chabot for helping us work on these important bills. I do want to educate my friends across the aisle that it is Burchett, birch like the tree, and et like I just ate breakfast. Can everybody say that together? Burchett? Burchett. Thank you. If I can get, if I can get Velasquez, y'all can get Burchett, okay? So I want to thank you. And I love saying that name, by the way, Chair Lady. That's really cool. You've been very kind to me. So thank y'all. And can we please have order? Have order, please. No, I really am fired up about this bill. I want to thank y'all for allowing me to.
You better hurry up, otherwise I'm going to make it a partisan bill.
Are you cutting in on my time, Chair Lady? No, I got it. Don't worry. And thank you, Mr. Schneider, for those kind words. Of course, the goal of correctional facilities should be to rehabilitate or to remove individuals that are dangerous to us from society. Learning is vital to everyone, regardless of where they are or who they are, and for our formerly incarcerated, a successful reentry into society can start with continued learning. To me, providing folks an opportunity to learn how to work in small business and work towards a good job is essential. Ultimately, I want to make sure individuals who are incarcerated but ready for a fresh start, a new beginning, that they have a real shot at success, not just some empty promises. I thank Mr. Jeffries for his leadership on this bill, on H.R. 5065, and I appreciate the constructive approach this committee has taken to solve serious issues such as this. And thank you Chair Lady Velasquez, and I yield the rest of my
By
time.
the way, it's Velasquez.
Velasquez. Well, I had it right the first time, but Ranking Member Shabbat told me otherwise.
Thank you. The gentleman is back. Are there any other members who wish to be recognized for a statement on H.R. 5065? The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Shabbat.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. As our committee heard in our hearing on this topic last month, up to 60% of people released from prison remain unemployed after a year, oftentimes seeking employment. Therefore, it's not surprising that about half of former inmates recidivate within 3 years of being released from prison. In other words, they've committed a crime and they're back behind bars. Small business ownership can provide steady employment, which can drastically lower the risk of recidivism with nonviolent offenders. This bill, H.R. 5065, the Prison Proprietorship for the Formerly Incarcerated Act, directs SCORE programming and mentorship services to the formerly incarcerated. I want to thank the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Jeffries, for their bipartisan work on this bill, and yield back.
The gentleman is back. Are there any other member who wish to be recognized for a statement on H.R. 5065? Mr. Spano.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I appreciate it. And just to echo what everybody else has said, it's always struck me as a lot alarming in many respects that we have individuals who are trying to kind of turn the page of their lives and start over, but they've got that mark against them of having that criminal history, and it makes it very, very, very difficult for them to kind of assimilate back into society by finding work and moving on. So the ability to give these folks the tools that they need to make their own way when that relates to starting their own small business is incredibly exciting to me. So thank you to the chair and thank you to the committee for this effort. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you for yielding back. And now I recognize myself briefly. Nearly 95% of the people currently in prison will be released, and one of the biggest obstacles they face is unemployment. Entrepreneurship is the best option for many. While the Prison to Proprietorship Act will provide the in-prison training on how to launch a business, we must ensure that the skills learned in the program are fully utilized upon release. Under this bill, SCORE will be required to provide the formerly incarcerated individuals with mentoring tailored to their unique needs. The mentorship will be invaluable to those re-entering our communities, and so I want to commend Mr. Jeffrey and Mr. Burchett for their collaboration. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, which will go a long way in reducing re-entry into the criminal system, creating new jobs, and promoting economic growth in communities. If there is no further discussion, the committee will move on to consideration of H.R. 5065. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 5065, the Prison to Proprietorship for Formerly Incarcerated Act.
Without objection, H.R. 5065 is considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Does anyone wish to offer an amendment? Seeing none, the question is now on H.R. 5065. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 5065 is agreed to. The question now occurs on reporting H.R. 5065 to the House. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. H.R. 5065 is reported favorably to the House. Without objection, the committee staff is authorized to correct punctuation, make other necessary technical corrections, and conforming changes. Without objection, members shall also be entitled to 2 days to file additional supplemental dissenting and minority views. The next bill is H.R. 5130, the Capturing All Small Businesses Act of 2019, introduced by Mr. VC, and co-sponsored by Mr. Hearn, which modifies the method for calculating the employee base size standard. I would now like to recognize the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Hearn, the co-sponsor of the bill, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'd like to thank my colleague, Representative Vesey, for your leadership on this important legislation, which will help provide small business manufacturers with greater competitive edge in the open marketplace. This bill provides parity with another important small business bill that this committee passed, which was signed into law nearly a year ago. The previous bill extended the runway for revenue-based small businesses, allowing them to stay smaller for a longer period of time. While revenue-based and employee-based firms differ in many respects, one thing remains constant, that competing in the open marketplace when a firm is not ready to leave the small business arena can have disastrous effects on a small business's growth trajectory. There is a reason why so many small businesses liken this transition as a jumping off a cliff. Oftentimes, small firms cannot compete against the giants in their particular industries and eventually fail, stay small, or become acquired in a large company's supply chain. None of these outcomes promotes growth for small businesses, and none of these options are good for competition. Therefore, it is critical that we ensure our small manufacturers are capable of successfully and smoothly transitioning out of the small business space into the open marketplace without falling off of this cliff. That is exactly what this bill does for small manufacturers. By extending the measurement of a small manufacturer's concern size from a rolling 12-month average to a 24-month average, we provide these small businesses with more time to build their competitive edge and infrastructure, so they're better equipped to handle a more robust competition once they graduate out of the small business space. In short, the bill is good, common sense policy aimed at encouraging small business growth and competition at the highest levels. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 5130, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I would like now to recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Vesey, the sponsor of the bill, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. I'm excited to be leading H.R. 5130, the Capturing All Small Businesses Act, with Representative Hearn to protect small businesses against being prematurely forced out of the small business category due to sudden growth. This bipartisan legislation lengthens the calculation period used by SBA to determine average employee count. One of the size standards SBA uses to determine if businesses is small from 12 months to 24 months. By extending SBA's calculation period for the employee-based size standards, we promote the sound and stable growth of small businesses, support job creation, and strengthen our industrial base. In my home state of Texas, small businesses make up about 99% of all businesses and employs 4.7 million Texans. As we've seen in this committee, these small businesses are critical for healthy, competitive, and innovative marketplace. However, under SBA size standards, a small business experiencing sudden growth could face being prematurely placed out of their small business size standard. If this occurs, businesses may face challenges, including no longer being able to qualify for SBA loans, contracts, and other assistance, and having to compete in the open market against much larger businesses. H.R. 5130 would grant small businesses additional time to mature and become better equipped for success in the open marketplace. The change in this bill also provides parity between small businesses subject to employee-based size standard and those subject to receipts-based size standards, which were modified last year through the Small Business Runway Extension Act by this committee. By amending the existing SBA employee-based size standards, we can provide protections that ensure our nation's small businesses can succeed in our economy. I am proud to offer this effort and hope this committee is able to advance this important legislation to provide much-needed relief to small businesses all across our great country. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. Now I recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'd also like to express my support for this legislation, which will encourage our small businesses to grow successfully and competitively into the mid-sized marketplace. We've heard too many stories of small businesses successfully providing significant value to the federal government and growing at a steady pace, only to hit a wall once they grow out of their small size threshold. We need to ensure that there is a pathway for sustained development for our nation's small businesses and small manufacturers, and this bill takes a step in the right direction. I want to thank the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Veazey, and the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Hearn, for their leadership on this issue. And it's actually nice to see a Texan and an Oklahoman working together. So we don't always see that. So thank you, gentlemen, and yield back.
The gentleman is back. Thank you, Mr. Shabbat. I will now recognize myself briefly. The SBA size standards represent the largest size that a business may be to remain classified as a small business concern. Size standards are important because they are used to determine eligibility for SBA's financial assistance and other federal programs, including government procurement programs designed to assist small contractors. The actual determination of what a small business is and what the small business size standards should be has also been a point of contention. Last year, we passed the Small Business Runway Extension Act, which modified the calculation period for the receipts-based size standard using the average of the preceding 5 years instead of the preceding 3 years. The act was in response to the concerns of small firms that outgrew their size standard and lost their eligibility for small businesses set-asides and SBA programs. By modifying the receipts-based formula, we granted small businesses additional time to transition into the open market. While this legislation was certainly a step in the right direction, it did not provide an equivalent change for those businesses subject to the employee-based size standard. Unfortunately, this standard was left intact, even though small businesses experienced the same challenges and concerns that the Runway Extension Act tries to alleviate. So HR 5030 today provide a reasonable solution to this issue, and I want to congratulate both gentlemen for their effort. So if there is no further discussion, the committee will move on to consideration of HR 5030, and the clerk will report the title of the bill.
HR 5130, Capturing All Small Businesses, Act of 2019.
Without objection, HR 5030 is considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Does anyone wish to offer an amendment? Seeing none, the question is now on HR 5030. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and HR 5030 is agreed to. The question now occurs on reporting HR 5130 to the House. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. HR 5030 is reported favorably to the House. Without objection, the committee staff is authorized to correct punctuation, make other necessary technical corrections, and conforming changes. Without objection, members shall also be entitled to 2 days to file additional supplemental, dissenting, and minority views. The final bill before us today is H.R. 5146, the Unlocking Opportunities for Small Business Act of 2019, introduced by Mr. Hagedorn and co-sponsored by Mr. Evans, which removes the barriers to entry for small businesses across the country. I would now like to recognize the bill sponsor, the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Hagedorn, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Velasquez. I appreciate that. Ranking Member Chavez. I think one of the wonderful things about this committee is the bipartisan nature in which you conduct it, and the way that the members get together and try to improve small businesses and do what we can and with our jurisdiction. So thank you for that. And I'd also like to thank my colleague, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Evans, for his hard work and collaboration with me on this legislation, which will, as the bill says, unlock opportunities for small contractors seeking to gain access to prime contracting opportunities with the federal government. Unfortunately, small contractors are kind of stuck in a catch-22. In order to receive a prime contract, federal agencies require evidence showing that the contractor is capable of doing the work, but they will generally only accept as proof of experience, also known as past performance, work done as a prime contractor with the government. So you can't get prime contracts if you don't have a record of past performance, but you can't get past performance experience without winning the contracts. So winning prime contracts for many small businesses, the key to sustained growth and making the leap from subcontracting or teaming with other companies to prime contracting can be exceedingly challenging due to this dilemma. So I have a little bit of experience with this as a congressional relations officer in the Treasury Department in my past work, and I saw how some of these contracts worked. And you come in, they'd score it and determine who would get the contracts. But I was speaking with a friend of mine, Adam Roosevelt, who does a lot of subcontracting with DHS just recently. He was at one of our hearings about a week ago, and he said, you know, it's really tough for us. We do the work, we're capable of it, but there's no way for the agencies even to score it. So I think in the future when we look at this, maybe we need a category in scoring that would say if you've done a lot of work as a subcontractor on these contracts, that would count for something and would give them an opportunity to kind of move past that. So that's maybe something we can look at in the future. This assessment of a contractor's capabilities based only on their experience as a prime contractor does a great disservice to many qualified and capable small contractors, as we said, that have performed vital and critical work as members of joint ventures. The work small contractors have performed in these roles may have great relevance to contract being bid. However, they are unable to showcase their capabilities due to the agency's focus on prime contracting experiences. I'd like to submit the rest of my statement for the record, and I appreciate the consideration of the members to vote for our bill, H.R. 5146. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Without
Madam Chair.
objections ordered. I would now like to recognize the bill's co-sponsor, the gentleman from Pennsylvania and Vice Chair of the committee, Mr. Evans, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman Vasquez and Ranking Member Shavit, for having this markup. Thank you, Congressman Hagedorn, for your leadership on this bill. In addition to the Congressman's comments, I would like to emphasize that this bill is especially important to minority-owned small businesses. Minority-owned small businesses in my particular home city of Philadelphia frequently work in joint ventures to pool their resources to work as subcontractors to prime contractors, who are usually minority or majority white-owned. Consequently, the majority of the work Philadelphia-based small businesses are performing cannot be counted as past performance when submitting bids to federal contractors. This hurts these small businesses, especially their ability to bid and compete. When contractors as primes, which also impacts the businesses' ability to grow, create jobs, and contribute economically to the community. This is especially impactful in Philadelphia, where the poverty rate is nearly 25%. This bill will permit those small businesses to use their work in joint ventures or as subcontractors to count as past performance, which will allow the businesses to build track records that are necessary to bid as primes for federal contracts. Consequently, minority-owned small businesses will feel fewer hurdles in their goal to prosper and flourish. I invite fellow members of the committee to support this passage of this important bill, and thank you. I yield back, Madam Chair.
The gentleman yields back, and now we recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Hagedorn, and the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Evans, for their leadership in this legislation, which I believe will reduce significant barriers to small contractors in the federal marketplace. As we've heard from our colleagues, obtaining relevant past performance is critical for a small business to be competitive for a contract award. Unfortunately, federal agencies take a narrow view on what they might consider as relevant past performance for a prime contract opportunity. This limits a small business's ability to compete for contracts that they would otherwise be a perfect fit for, which is detrimental both to the small business and to the government. In short, the important thing for a federal agency to know is whether a business is capable of successfully completing the specific task being requested. If the small business can show that it has successfully performed that type of work in the past, it should be able to use that as evidence that it can complete the task in the future. It's that simple. This bill will not only unlock prime contracting opportunities for small businesses, but will also have the additional positive impact of eventually growing the industrial base, increasing competition, and lowering costs for the taxpayer. I urge my colleagues to support this important legislation and yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Thank you. And I will now recognize myself briefly. First, I would like to commend both Mr. Hagedorn and Mr. Evans for their collaboration on this bill and working to make it easier for small businesses seeking to perform as prime contractors. Past performance is an important factor in evaluating many solicitations. Knowing how a small business performed a contract in the past is an important indicator of a small business ability to successfully perform in the future. H.R. 5146 addresses this issue by allowing small businesses to leverage past performance experience obtained as part of joint ventures and subcontracts, which otherwise wouldn't be an option. With this legislation, we reaffirm our commitment to offering small businesses the tools they need to thrive. Thus, I urge my colleagues to support the bill. If there is no further discussion, the committee, Mr. Spano is recognized. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ranking Member, and my congratulations to Mr. Hagedorn and Mr. Evans. Great job. This is a bill that I think really is an important piece of legislation that down the road we'll kind of look back to and say, wow, that really transformed small business owners' ability to be able to break into government contracting. I think it could be really transformative. So fully support it, and it's important that we make sure our tax dollars do more to build up Main Street, and I think this bill does that. So I encourage my colleagues' support. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. Does there is any other member who wish to speak on this bill? If there's no further discussion, the committee will move on to consideration of H.R. 5146. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 5146.
Without objection, H.R. 4146 is considered as read and open for amendments at any point. Does anyone wish to offer an amendment? Seeing none, the question is now on H.R. 5146. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 5146 is agreed to. The question now occurs on reporting H.R. 5146 to the House. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, H.R. 5146 is reported favorably to the House. Without objection, the committee staff is authorized to correct punctuation, make other necessary technical corrections, and conforming changes. Without objection, members shall also be entitled to 2 days to file additional supplemental dissenting and minority views. I thank all the members for their participation today, and if there is no further business to come before the committee, we are adjourned. Thank you.